All right, in this lecture, we're going to look at Socrates' crafting of a city in speech from Book 2. So, as we saw, Socrates said that he was so moved by the accounts of injustice given by Glaucon and Adeimantus that he felt compelled to give a speech in defense of justice. And he does this by reference to a larger example, as we said. So we have justice in the soul. In order to understand that, we need to look to a bigger example. And he says, if we're going to if we're going to learn the alphabet and learn to read, it's easier to look at large letters than it is to look at small ones. So that's his motivation, and he dives straight in, and he builds this first city, which is a city of necessity. And he says that, the principle on which a city is founded, and so the principle on which we're going to craft this city in speech, is that a city serves a need, a community serves a need. People lack self-sufficiency. If people were self-sufficient, they wouldn't need to live in community. So there must be some need, a lack of self-sufficiency, which motivates people to live in a city. And he says basically, because of this, we can assume that people play different roles in a city. One person does one job, one person does another job, and it's because each person cannot do all of the jobs that there is the necessity of a city. So this is the founding principle that he uses to make the just city and to define how this city comes into being. So he says, along with this principle, this is kind of corollary principle, a kind of a principle that is derivative from it but refers directly back to it. That's what a correlative principle is. He says each person should do their own job. So every person in a city has a natural aptitude, a natural ability, some skill and some ability that is necessary to the city, and which each person adds. And here we can think of the parts of a body. Each organ is capable of a certain job that is indispensable to the life of the body. So each part of the city is analogously going to be like the parts of the body. They each contribute their own work, and you can't replace one with the other. The heart and the stomach are different. You can't, the heart can't do what the stomach does. And each one has to do its own job. And if they interfere with each other, then it'll be a problem. So this is the basic principles on which Socrates constructs the city. So who is in the city? This is the constitution. So we've already encountered this idea of the constitution. That's what politeia, republic, as we have it translated, it means constitution. So what is the constitution of the city? The constitution of the city is the people who are in it and the jobs they do and the way that those jobs relate to each other. So we can talk about the constitution of a body. The parts relate to each other in a certain way, and a well-constituted body is a healthy body, one in which the parts are doing their job. And a sick body is one in which the parts are disrupted somehow. So who is in this city of necessity, this just city that Socrates builds off of this principle? There are all of the basic things that we need in a society, he says. We need farmers to make food. We need shoemakers to provide the farmers with shoes so that they're not out in the field getting their feet cut on rocks and stuff. We need house builders to build houses for the farmers and the shoemakers. And now the house builders need shoes and food. And we need weavers to make them clothes. And he goes on, and we need tool makers and herdsmen and leather workers. And sooner or later, the city is actually not going to be able to have everything it needs on its own, and we're going to need commercial traders. Maybe we have a bad crop this year. Well, we're going to have to go trade our leather with some other city in order to get food. And then he says, well, now we're going to need a medium of exchange. We're going to need something that allows people to trade with each other. We need coins. And so we have coins pop up. And with coins, we get retail workers and wage laborers. And so Socrates paints this city. It has very little luxuries, and the coins and exchange and the retail and all of that is only for the sake of necessity. It's only for the ease of life. It hasn't gone into being something in pursuit of luxury. And there's no ambition for growth or conquest. The city just stays the size that it is. It maintains itself, and it has a kind of moderation and harmony. The moderation is only in proportion with necessity. And he says that these people, they live this kind of simple life. It's a kind of country, rural lifestyle, and they pass on their same way of life to their offspring. So here we have this idea again of the torch race, the inheritance and the passing on. They inherit this lifestyle and they pass it on, and nothing changes in those inheritances and passing ons. So they pass on the same style of life to their offsprings. So then Adeimantus says, Socrates, this city is unacceptable. It's as if you were making a city for pigs. And I'm not going to go into the complexities of what this means. There are several interpretations on what the city of pigs means. But generally what it means is it's not a city suitable for human excellence. That humans live a life, according to Adeimantus, a kind of aristocratic desire for luxury and for conquest and for glory and things like that. There's also an interpretation of the city of pigs. I will just say briefly that is a misogynistic phrase, and he's saying basically that this is a city fit for women or something. So that the misogynistic tone there would be that it's not one suitable to heroes and people who are like trying to be glorious and like fight and like be having honor and things like that. So it can either mean pigs in this sense of just, animals and like not having luxuries, or it can also potentially have this kind of sexist undertone to it. Either way, what is crucial here is that Adeimantus, his disdain for this city that Socrates made, is only an indication of his own shortcomings. And what Adeimantus brings in here is going to make the city sick. It's going to make it feverish. He calls it a feverish city. And that reflects the desire of the aristocratic individual that Adeimantus literally is, but also that enters into the city at this point and turns the city sick. So he says, can't we give them, luxuries? Can't they sit? Socrates says they sit on like wire benches, benches made out of metal. And he says, can't we give them pillows? Can't they sit on a pillow and be comfortable? And Socrates says, oh, I see what you're saying, Adeimantus. We should see how injustice comes about in the city and how the city becomes sick. And Adeimantus doesn't understand. He's like, oh, okay. No, I just thought that they should be comfortable and be able to sit on a couch. But really, what Adeimantus is bringing in here is this desire for luxury and to be to have these kind of bodily pleasures and things like that. So this goes against the principles which founded the city because it brings in unnecessary elements. So now all of a sudden we need luxuries which are unnecessary, and we need people whose jobs are directed towards providing these unnecessary things in the city. So it's as if the body has become sick. It's a feverish city, and that's because these unnecessary additions have been made to it. And in a like manner, the unnecessary additions leads to an unlimited number of additions. So the city begins to grow almost like a cancer, like a tumor. It just grows and grows and grows and grows. And it's not healthy growth. It's a very unhealthy growth. And that's what Socrates says. Okay, we can see how injustice comes about through this kind of unlimited growth of unnecessary parts. So what does this bring about? It brings about war. And the city becomes oriented towards conquest and colonialism. And this was literally what was happening in the Greek world. The Greek cities were forced almost into a kind of colonialism in order to be able to maintain these aristocratic desires and these desires for luxury and things like that. So now that we have a sick city, a feverish city that desires luxuries and greed, it only looks to the unlimited acquisition of money and the unlimited acquisition of wealth and land and these things. And this is the cause of war. Socrates says, now we have seen the cause of war, and whether or not it is good or bad, we can say something about that later. But what we can see at this point is that luxuries and the unlimited acquisition of money, that is the cause of war. And one of the things that we see here is that while we have a kind of continuous thread in this city that goes from being the just city to the feverish city, and then going into this kind of colonial warring city, we have a continuous thread there, and war comes about because of the decisions of that city, and it becomes a kind of it becomes necessary in a way to defend the luxury. So it's an unnecessary addition to add this desire for the unlimited acquisition of money and wealth, but then it becomes a necessity. And this is one of the kind of quirky, strange things that pops up that Socrates doesn't directly talk about, but that plays itself out later, in the way that you have a line of inheritance there. So the city, the feverish city, inherits, this need for war. But what about a city that is still just, that still lives by the needs, like by basic necessity, but who now has people coming to colonize them, right? So at first we were looking just at the city that becomes the colonizer, but then once we step outside of that and see colonial powers coming in and disrupting the way of life, all of a sudden war becomes necessary to defend even the just city. So war becomes this thing where it sucks you in even if you didn't cause war, right? War is caused by defending luxury and by being greedy and needing more. But all of a sudden, the just society is thrown into this, is sucked into this world. And in a way, they've kind of been forced to stoop down to their level. And we're going to see that play out further in the rest of the book. But just to note that here, war becomes necessary. This is analogous to the way that Glaucon needs to defend justice and injustice. So even someone who doesn't pursue injustice gets kind of sucked in the same way that they're being sucked in the just city is being sucked into war. And if they don't, then they will be destroyed, basically. So Thrasymachus is going to take advantage of you and destroy your life unless you arm yourself against the unjust. So he says, now we need guardians. So in the just city that he first made, this city of necessity, city of pigs, there wasn't really any rulers. There were just people doing jobs and giving to each other what each of them did. There wasn't kind of a centralized form of government that was organizing everything. He says, now we need that. And the reason is more or less that we have this war, we have this need for war, whether it's to defend ourselves from unjust cities or to be colonial and to go out and do that. Either way, we need war now, even if we're a just city. And so we need a class of people who are soldiers. But if these soldiers are given free rein, if they don't have any guardians over them, they will be able to use their force, their strength, to take advantage of the rest of the city. So what we need is someone or some people in the city who protect the city, who preserve it. And so he says, we're going to need someone who is both courageous and high-spirited and strong and has keen perception and these things that the soldiers have. But they can't just be that, because as like a wolf has those characters and is but is vicious and can be taking advantage of people. What we need is someone who also has gentleness, who balances out their aggressiveness and their high-spiritedness with gentleness. And he says, these are natural opposites. How are we ever going to find something that combines these things? These are opposites, gentleness and strength. And he's kind of at a loss, and he's like, crap, this ruins my whole plan. And you get this funny moment where it seems like Socrates really has no idea what he's going to say next, and he's kind of stumped. And then all of a sudden he says, aha, I had an insight. I thought of something. What about watchdogs? Watchdogs mix these characteristics as a natural kind of way of being. They have gentleness towards their friends, and yet they're courageous and strong and ready to fight against their enemies. So he says, look at these. Dogs have this ability. Dogs are like philosophers in a way. And so now, I mean, if you're sitting there at this conversation, you're probably thinking, where is Socrates going with this? He just goes from like, we need guardians, to like, look at the fact that dogs have these mixed capacities and mixed natures. Dogs are like philosophers. And you're like, this guy is just like on a random train of associations here. What's going on? And then he says, to continue on this train of associations, dogs are discriminating. They have an ability to judge. And here there's got to be this echo of the Egyptian god Anubis, who's popped up a few times already. Anubis is in the underworld and judges your life based on what you did. There's the scales of justice, right? And he says, dogs have this ability. They show kindness to friends and they're mean to enemies. So they have this ability to discern between them. He says, therefore, we need philosophers to rule, because philosophers are like dogs, and dogs have this natural aptitude that mixes gentleness and spiritedness. And so we need mixed natures. It's a crazy argument, and it's not really well-founded. It's very fantastical, but that's what we get from Socrates, and it's very interesting, but that's it. So to summarize this idea, from a city that has become sick, we now have a need of philosophers to come and act to preserve the body of the state. So the guardians will act as antibodies, which are the parts in the blood that fight off viruses and work to maintain the health of the body. So the guardians must be like that. They must be concerned only about the health and preservation of the body as a whole.